Alright everybody, welcome back. In this video, we're going to talk about nonlinear deformers. So I'm going to go ahead and begin by creating 3 cylinders here. Last thing we're going to do is just turn on wireframe on shaded to drive home the point of what is happening even further. Okay, with our 3 cylinders created and laid out, let's go ahead and get rid of the grid, and now we will select our first cylinder here. And very similar to what I did in the previous video where I was building out the character foundation, the bridging version of building out the character foundation, I'm going to go to Deform, I'm going to go to Nonlinear, and now I'm going to go to Bend, and I'm just going to select Bend. And now, just like last time, I should be able to play around with the curvature and get similar results. You can only go up to a certain amount here, but you can start typing in values all you want. So let's go ahead and make it 90 degrees again, like we did in the bridging video. You will notice it doesn't work out all that well. Let's make it 45. You can start seeing sort of a bend here in the sense that these vertices have been rotated a little bit, but overall, it's not looking pretty good for this first cylinder here, right? Let's go ahead and do the exact same thing to the second cylinder now. So the second cylinder, exact same thing. It's going to go up to Deform, going to go down to Nonlinear, and I'm going to select Bend. And once again, I'm going to set this to 90. And we can see much improved results here. Deformers, nonlinear deformers, any kind of deformer only works if your model has geometry. It's not going to work if you don't have the geometry to work with. In the previous video with the bridging exercise for the character foundation, we had enough geometry in order to create that inverted U. Here, we have enough geometry to turn this cylinder into a C, but this cylinder here has absolutely no geometry to work with except for the bare essentials, meaning that if I try to bend it, it's not going to bend. You need geometry in order to bend or use any kind of deformers for your models. So now that we know that this version works because we have more geometry as compared to this version, let's go ahead and play around with some of the other values here. We have, aside from curvature, we have low bound and high bound, which affect this to create sort of a to create sort of different kinds of bends here, sort of half bends as opposed to complete bends for the entire model. We can select the actual bend handle itself, the thing that was generated when I went to Deform, Nonlinear, and Bend, and we can move it, and we can see how that affects our model here. Not only can we move it, we can, of course, rotate it, and that will affect our model in all kinds of interesting ways. We can scale it as well, and that will also affect it. And of course, not only can we play around with the bend handle that was created here, we can also physically manipulate the actual model itself that is being affected here. You get all kinds of weird effects, like this. Using it correctly with models that have lots of geometry, you can make some very, very interesting things with this, as you can see. Let's also add in a nonlinear deform bend here and see what it's like when the model has already been pre-rotated, how that's going to change things up. Let's play around with the curvature. Make it 45 this time. There we go. Now we can play around with the handle again. We can rotate it. If we want it to be laying down or laying on its side. Again, you can do plenty of interesting things by playing around with both the bend handle that is created when you create a nonlinear deformed bend for the first time, and by manipulating the actual model itself at this point. Let's say I was happy with this and with this C here. If I am happy with the changes that I have done with my nonlinear deformers, you must erase the history when you're done. This is a situation where this stuff will not remain. This stuff will not work the way you want it to if you don't erase the history after you're done. So now that we're done playing around with these bends, and I want to use them for like modeling or some other stuff, I'm going to select both of these assets here. This is polycylinder 2 and 3. And I'm just going to delete by type, history, modify, freeze, modify, center. And you'll notice that by deleting the history, it gets rid of those bend handles that were created. So that bend handle that was created initially when I created the nonlinear deformed bend, those are now gone, and now these are just solid models. But at this point, if I wanted to, I can add in another bend and start deforming with this as my default shape now. So I can do another nonlinear deformed bend. And I can do this again for something more interesting, using that initial weird C as my default shape here. Maybe I could do this. Now, of course, these ends here start messing up, so you probably don't want to play around with this too much after you do a nonlinear deformed bend once. But it is something you can play around with on your own time, testing out these nonlinear deformed bends. Whoa! And doing even crazier things like that. And once you're happy with that, I will go ahead and edit by type, history, and now this is my default shape for this. And this first polycylinder, I'm not happy with it at all, so I'm just going to select it and the bend handle. I'm just going to delete them. I don't need them anymore. I just want to stick with polycylinder 2 and 3. A quick cut before we move on to different kinds of nonlinear deforms. I just want to point out that the nonlinear deformed bend doesn't just have to work with an entire object you select. I have history here. Let me go ahead and delete that history. It doesn't have to just work by selecting a whole object. You can also select just specific components that you want to manipulate. So in this case, I have this cylinder with some little branches that I offshoot via extrudes. So let's go into front view. I only want to control this part here, right? And nothing else. So I have with just those selected, I can just go to deform, nonlinear, bend. And now I have a bend just for those specific components that I selected. So in this case, let's bend it 90. Maybe I'll make another one. This will be a deformer just for the entire top here. There we go. You can start doing some very weird stuff like this if you want. And if you're not happy with how a deformer is looking, like this one, you can just delete that deformer, and your selected components or objects will go back to how it was before you actually deleted it. So this is one of the few things you can safely delete without having to delete history. If you're happy with how a deformer looks and you want to stamp it down, then you have to select the actual mesh and go to edit, delete by type history. But if you're not happy with how a deformer looks, you can just select the actual deformer that was created when you went up to deform, nonlinear, and bend, and you can just delete that bend handle, and that will take the asset back to its default look. But I'm kind of happy with how this top part looks. Maybe I'll do it one more time. Let's say I was happy with that. And now I'll just go ahead and edit, delete by type. History, those bend handles disappear, but my changes remain the same. So that is nonlinear bends. Let's discuss some other kinds of deforms. Let's go up to deform. Let's go down to nonlinear. And now instead of bend, let's just go ahead and test out the other ones. Let's test flare. Actually, let's go ahead and make sure I have the cylinder selected first. Now, deform, nonlinear, flare. And let's see what this does. Go ahead and make this a little bit bigger so I can see all my options here a little bit more clearly. Okay, let's go ahead and start playing around with. I would wholeheartedly encourage you to, like with most everything else you're exposed to for the first time in the Maya program, to just create random objects and just start testing them out. In this case, for cylinders, be aware that in order to properly test them out, you need models or assets with lots of geometry in them already to actually see them in proper effect. All right, well, that's flare. Let's go ahead and turn this back to normal because I don't actually like how this looks that much, at least not compared to bend. So I'm going to go ahead and just delete the flare handle here and just turn my cylinder back to normal. And let's try something else. I'm going to select the cylinder again. Deform, nonlinear. Let's go to sine this time. And let's see what we have here. Let's do something else with this sine, actually. Let's go ahead and delete the handle and get it back to normal for now. I've gone ahead and done a little bit of setup work here. I made a new sine. I played around with the amplitude, and I played around a little bit with my animation timeline down here. We haven't done anything with animation yet in the semester, and we're not officially really going to just yet, but I did want to just note that I went into the settings here, which are located right here. This little person with the gear icon. I changed the frame rate to 30 FPS. Playback start and end, animation start and end at 0, and their end is at 150, so, 5 seconds approximately-ish. Yeah, 5 seconds approximately-ish. The reason for that is that I just want to test and show off that some deformers work best as tools for animation. And, in this case, the sine is a great form of animation. So in this case, I'm going to go up to frame 30, and I'm going to take what I have here. I'm going to take my offset and push this up to 0.25. And I'm going to go ahead and press S to key that at that moment. Now I'm going to go back to frame 0 and key my offset at 0 and press S to save that. And if I start sliding through my timeline, we can see that we can start seeing some changes here. We can make this more extreme though. 0.25, let's make it 1, and press S to lock that in. Let's play it. There we go. A nice basic animation. Deformers are great tools not just for manipulating high poly models that have lots of geometry. They're also fantastic as tools for an animation. Animation is something we're not going to cover in this class in that great depth, and when we do, it's not going to be through deformers, but keep in mind that deformers are a great way of creating animation, especially for basic models like this. Let's push it up to 60. Now, if you create animation, if you intend to use deformers as a tool for animation, keep in mind that means that this is one of those rare cases where deleting the history is going to be a very bad thing. If you delete the history for this, then you lose that deformer handle that we were working with, that sine handle that we were working with, and now we no longer have that animation anymore. We would have to animate this some other way via a rig, probably. So if you intend to use deformers for animation, keep in mind that deleting them deleting the history, either just deleting them outright or deleting the history of the asset that is attached to that deformer handle is not a good idea. This is one of those rare cases where deleting the history is not a good thing. Let's try another deformer. Go up to Deform, Nonlinear. Make sure again I select my object first. Deform, Nonlinear. Let's try Squash this time. Let's see what we have here for options. Now, one of the key components of animation, I'm sure you can imagine, is the idea of squash and stretch. Well, this is a perfect representation of doing squash and stretch. This is yet another deformer where you would probably want to use animation. And if you do, this is yet another deformer where you probably don't want to delete the history if you intend to use it as a tool for animation. Okay, let's go ahead and delete this. Let's move on and try another one out. We still have, I think, 2 more that I want to show. So we had, let's go up to Deform, let's go to Nonlinear. We have 2 more. We have Twist. Remember, with all of these deformers, you can play around with the positioning of the handle to get different results. I wasn't doing that with a few of the previous ones, but you can for any and all of these, not just the bend one. You can play around with the handle anytime you want to get some weird results. You can also actively move around the model itself and see the result play out. And again, just like with the bend, you can also do this with specific components, not just for entire objects that you select. You can just select specific things like just these vertices, and then I can go to Deform, Nonlinear, and maybe for those I want to do the squash. All right, let's go ahead and get rid of these 2 handles. Usually when I use deforms, just as an aside, usually whenever I use deforms, especially in modeling, I would most often than not just use bend. But as you can see, sign and squash have great use in animation. So bend, sign, and squash are the 3 main ones you should really make note of for your toolbox. The last one to talk about is going to be the wave. And waves actually work best with planes. So I'm going to make a plane here. So let's go ahead now with our plane selected with the 100 subdivisions by 100 subdivisions. Let's go to Deform, Nonlinear, Wave, and let's see what we got here. This is yet another deform tool that would work great with animation. Now I would recommend you test it out for yourself because this will be another great thing to use with animation, especially for a plane that has very, very high geometry. Like even this, I could probably stand to boost this up even further and get even better results, get even better, nicer looking results at that point. Those are all of the nonlinear deforms that you have access to. The bend, the flare, the sign, the squash, the twist, the wave. You can use them with whole objects. You can use them with specific components. The ones that I would recommend you keep an eye out on and make use of every now and again are bend, sign, squash, and wave. We will actually make use of a few of these as well as some other deform tools here in the next video where we put these to the test and actually use them to customize and personalize our character foundations. So thank you very much for watching. This was a brief intro on deformers. Again, I recommend you test them out for yourself. They're very fun to use, especially in conjunction with animation. One quick final note, you probably noticed throughout this video I was having some trouble with my mouse as I was hovering over, just having these whole values and then being forced to just type in things in order to show you how the deformers work. I just wanted to very quickly point out that you can hold Control on your keyboard and you will have better control over the values that you're hovering over. So and get something like that. So if you want better control over the values here, I would recommend you hold Control on your keyboard. That gives you some more control. Not something you will use all that often, but especially in the case of playing around with Deformers, holding Control on your keyboard is really going to help. That is my final note. Thank you very much for watching. Bye-bye.